at the negotiations that will now ensue between the various political parties ahead of, this is going to happen ahead of the final results being declared by the IEC. But as you know, that some political parties, of course, because they've got party agents across the country, already know what the final result looks like, but legally, it is only the IEC that can declare the final result. So South Africa looks set to be governed by a coalition with no party securing an outright majority so far. What complicates matters is the number of political parties that have to be factored in, and more especially their vastly different policies. The question is, do political party ideologies and policies stand in the way of possible coalitions? To help us navigate this complexity is Advocate Vasu Gounden, who is the founder and director at Accord, a globally recognized conflict management institute. Advocate, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. What's the first principle of negotiations? Whether it is negotiating when it's in a conflict or negotiation even to come to an agreement in terms of a coalition?
Morning, Aldrin. Morning to your viewers. Well, the first principle is that you don't go into a negotiation if you don't have an intention to compromise. The very nature of a negotiation is such that it's a give and take. You go into a negotiation with a clear sense of your objectives and your policies and your positions, but also with the clear intention that you would have to, at some point, give on some of the positions and the policies that you have.
Yeah, so all of this talk that we're hearing now from political parties, hey, these are our non-negotiables, we will not back down on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You say that unfortunately those would need to be left at the door.
Well, I mean, that means that the negotiation has already started. The fact that parties are putting their non-negotiables on the table, it's part of the process of negotiation. So negotiation is not an event. It's not that the political parties will get into a room, sit down, and knock out an agreement. The negotiations would have started long before the elections had commenced. And now what you see in the public domain is part of the negotiation process.
Yeah, for somebody watching what's currently happening, for South Africa, this is the first time that we see something like this. And if these numbers still remain as they are, that would mean that the ANC would be below that 50% plus one threshold, currently now at 40.11% of the vote. What is it as we, as the electorate, would need to be taking into consideration as political parties start their negotiations? Because also, when I vote for a political party, I vote for them on the basis of the manifesto and what they've promised. However, these are the outcomes of an election, and there's no outright winner.
I think that essentially, if you look at all of the political parties, there's no doubt that we have ideological differences amongst the political parties, and there's somehow a kind of clear ideological divide that we see in the political space. So when you vote, and you vote on the basis of a political program, what the political parties tell you they will deliver, I think essentially, if we're looking at broadly what South Africans are interested in, South Africans are interested in a secure environment. They're interested in educating their kids and having a roof over their heads, having proper service delivery, etc. So all the political parties at the end of the day promise that. How they will get there is what will be the subject of the negotiation. So the electorate, I think, can be comfortable at the end of the day that, yes, what has been promised to a large extent will be delivered. What that means then, Aldrin, is that the parties are not too far off. However, there are fundamental ideological differences, and I don't think that those are insurmountable. 2 weeks ago, I was invited by the Aerospace, Marine and Defense Association to do a scene setting for a discussion amongst all the political parties on South Africa's national interest. and what are the external threats and what are the internal threats. And I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised as a South African that despite the fact that they had differences, they were more or less having a consensus on what are the external threats and what are the internal threats to our national security. And I did say to the parties, as diverse as the ANC or DA on the one side, with the Freedom Front on the other side, that I was, as a South African, felt comfortable that they can, in fact, reach agreement even on difficult issues.
Yeah. What about the power dynamics that are at play? If you look at the results, of course, the various parties have different results in terms of the support that they've secured from the electorate. If we look at the provisional results right now, ANC 40.11%, the Democratic Alliance 21.72%, the MK Party 14.84%, the EFF at 9.37%. So what about the power dynamics that are at play here? Hey, listen, I'm coming to the table with most of them numbers, therefore I must have more say. Where on the other end, someone else might argue, in the case of former President Jacob Zuma, that I come with a lot of experience. I've been the former president of the country.
Yeah, so you put a post, Aldrin, on your social media that don't discount anybody because even though they may not have experience, they will gain the experience, right? You put that on your post. So I think experience does count. And as South Africans, we want to make sure that we have people who have experience in governance. But there are new players, and the new players will learn also. Now, when it comes to the power dynamics that we will see in negotiations, obviously parties will have to do an assessment. And this is the first thing that parties are going to do, is they're going to do an assessment now of the totality of the political landscape. And then they're going to look at the seats. So let's talk about the National Assembly. They will look at the distribution of seats in the National Assembly. They will also be looking down the line in terms of policies that will come up for negotiation and how that will play out. And so a lot of this will bear on them as they go into the negotiations. Now, I would expect that with the major parties, that they would already have done a lot of strategizing because we did know that coalition was a real possibility. And we've reached a stage in South Africa now with multi-party democracy that with the proliferation of a number of parties, we will be in coalition territory for a long time. So parties have already experienced this at a provincial and local government. I'm not sure all of our experiences have been that good, but lessons have been learned. And so I think now the negotiations will be about power and policies, about positions and policies, and parties will have to do a very clear assessment of the political landscape. You know, I've been in many of these situations of political conflict across the continent, working with some of our leaders, including President Mandela and including President Jacob Zuma. We've worked together in Burundi, we've worked together in Madagascar, and he's a consummate mediator and negotiator. So I think many of the parties know the rules of the game and understand that compromise is the name of the game.
Yeah. What about the number of people that then constitute the coalition? Is it better to go with the least number of political parties as possible to avoid perhaps maybe conflict and disagreements around policies and so forth? And I'm also asking this on the basis of, you look, for instance, at what's playing out in Israel or what's playing out in Germany, where in Germany you have some level of stability with the coalition, not so much when it comes when it comes to Israel. So when political parties look at an invitation that is being put before them, or they are the ones that are sending the invitation, are they doing that also looking at the number of political parties that would be required to constitute the coalition?
Yeah, and I'm glad, Aldrin, that you raised the global environment also. So South Africans need to be comforted that this is not new to South Africa. And yes, we will see a lot of bickering. We will see a lot of public posturing amongst the political parties. It might even get bad at some times. But South Africans should take comfort that this is the normal state of politics. There are many, many countries in Europe currently that go through long coalition negotiations before they form a government. I hope ours won't be too long, because I think we need to get back to the business of governing the country. But, you know, this is a normal course of politics. So South Africans should not be alarmed when they see all of these negotiations and posturing taking place. So that's the first point. The second, coming to your point about many parties or fewer parties, there's no hard and fast rule. Sometimes it's better in a complex situation that you have two parties. It's easier to negotiate with the two parties in a coalition. But sometimes when the two parties may be fairly far off ideologically, then there may be possible to bring in other smaller parties in a coalition so that there's a balance, and the smaller parties can also work with the larger parties to encourage negotiations as the process goes forward. So there's no hard and fast rule. I think if, for example, the ANC was closer to 50%, it may have looked to a few smaller parties to cross the threshold. If it doesn't get closer to 50%, it may look at one or a larger party or two large parties to see that it can get across the threshold. And strategically, they may want to have fewer parties that they negotiate with as they go forward.
Yeah, and finally, we're having a conversation a bit earlier on with one of our analysts, Stuart, and Stuart was saying that we need to have legislation in place so that the coalition agreements are legally binding. But what we see from the German experience is that they are going through the political conventions instead of legislation, meaning that it is all dependent on the political parties. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think, you know, at the end of the day, coalitions are about trust and confidence building. We can legislate it, and maybe we will legislate it in the future. But at this point, I think the parties know each other pretty well. At least the big parties know each other pretty well, even though the MK party is a new party, but President Zuma is not a newcomer to politics. So to a large extent, even his views are known. So the large political parties know each other. They know where they stand on the issues. They've worked with each other. And trust and confidence building, we don't expect overnight that they will start to trust each other, but certainly they know that the limits to which they can push you know, these negotiations before we get a coalition. And let me just make a last point, if you're ending this interview now, or if you have to, that I think the political parties have to put the nation first. Now, it's not a cliche thing to say that at this point in our trajectory of development as a nation, where we still have huge poverty, unemployment, and inequality on the one side, and on the other side, you have a fairly affluent community, and then we have an economy that has certain challenges. So if I was sitting as a political party going into the negotiations, I would want to look at saying, how do I get an arrangement that balances both of this, meaning that I need to have an arrangement at a national level, which is usually about the economy and the fiscus. How do I get an arrangement at that level that brings in revenue? And how do I craft arrangements at a provincial level, whether I'm a dominant party or not, at the provincial level, that allows for distribution of that income and service delivery to the public? That's what's going to move our nation forward.
I wonder if geopolitics further complicates the negotiations. I would have loved to continue the conversation with you, Advocate Vasu Gounden there, who is the founder and the director at Accord. So as you heard him there saying that the first principle of negotiations is being willing to compromise.